Can you guys hear me? Things a bit low. It's okay, I'll keep like that. So this talk's gonna be about some of my perspective as a person from the South, the global South, some of the things that I noticed in particular about science communication, which is one of the perspectives that we want to bring here, but also gonna talk a bit about post-quantum, some other topics. Hopefully everything will come together. If it's not clear, let me know. I wanted to add it a bit more at the end, but I couldn't. So just a bit of an intro. The structure is going to be, first I'm going to talk, introduction, some comments. I'm going to talk about knowledge barriers, both including science communication, science outreach, and issues that if you're in academia, probably you're familiar as well. Technology barriers, sport control, this kind of things, how those things work together in a way. And a bit about quantum readiness around the world and what we can reflect upon, considering all of those things. So just a bit about me. So I am a physicist. I'm not a hacker, or not like, for sure, I'm not super into cryptography as well, but I do have a background on quantum computers. I work with quantum computing in Canada at CMC Microsystems, doing more of the algorithm side, as we discussed a bit on the other talks. I'm Brazilian. I'm original from Brazil. I moved to Canada 1 year and some months ago. And I'm doing science communication in quantum physics and quantum computing since 2019 or so, which is about when I started my PhD. So I have some insights both from the quantum physics, particularities of talking about quantum physics, and how this is similar or different to talk about quantum computing. And also, two disclaimers. First of all, I'm not the Global South. I don't want to talk on behalf of everyone. I do have, I brought some data, I brought things to drive my point home, but I'll try not to be too specific about other countries as well. And also, should we even use this term? Because I gave a similar talk, and this question came up, and I think it's very interesting. This question came up from someone else from the Global South as well. And I think it's a good point because we do have very particularities, particular difficulties or things that are a strong feat. For instance, there are countries that are like very into getting achieve sovereignty in terms of quantum computing, quantum hardware, quantum software, try to get everything in their country. Some others are okay with quantum, like just cloud access. Some countries are not discussing this at all. There's a lot of things that are different geopolitical issues here, but I just want to point out because I think there are some lessons, in particular from Brazil, in particular also with people that I discuss as well, that I think it might be insightful and general enough to try to discuss this as a whole. So, academia and science communication. I don't know how many of you are in academia, but I just want to point this out because it's the most, I think, obvious part for us, I guess. And I always like to refer to Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto from Arthur Schwartz. And just a quick comment, I am also part of a volunteering work called Arthur Schwartz Institute, and I have some buttons there, some pins there if you guys want. It's Brazilian Institute. And we talk about open knowledge, open science. We try to do courses for marginalized groups back in Brazil, other stuff. But it's not just about that. It's just that I found really insightful that he actually brings attention to this many years ago, and he mentions Global South. So I think it's very powerful the way that he says. He really makes you feel like actually acting on it. So information is power, but like all power, there are those who want to keep them from themselves. So that's very interesting statement. So I'm abbreviating a bunch of things, but he's really coming after Elsevier, for instance, and the higher prices that you need to, for instance, to publish for open access. You have absurd fees if you want to have your paper as an open access, for instance, Nature, Science. This tweet, I just think is very obvious how absurd is this, because if you're actually publishing, for instance, Cosmopolitan, you get money, you don't lose money, right? So here's an idea. Also, you can maybe send your stuff to Cosmopolitan to pay for your Nature articles, maybe, I'm not sure. And well, those values are actually even worse now. Those values all increase. But yeah, that's part of the absurd of like the gatekeeping of it all. Here's where he mentions actually the Global South, which I think is nice. He's talking about for academics to pay money to actually read stuff and have these articles provide to elite universities, but not to the Global South, which was quite an issue. Still an issue up to this day. Conferences, I think, is a very clear problem. Even for like this is IEEE Quantum this year, 2024. So even the virtual conference, you need to pay $600. So this is quite absurd, especially because, well, converting to local currency, this is like absurd value. Even for me, now in Canada, not doable. Okay, I just want to pass this, to discuss this because I think it was the most trivial part. I think this is more about my experiences and things that might be more debatable, like, is this really important? Is this really what we should think about? And tomorrow we're gonna have some debates. One of the debates is gonna be precisely about quantum hype, and I'm obviously gonna talk in favor of trying to fight this a bit, but I think there's a lot of nuance here. But just as a starter, I think most of you, probably everyone, heard this phrase from Feynman. He says that it's safe to say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. This is like a go-to phrase that people start presentations about quantum computing, quantum physics, and well, I'm not a fan of this phrase, and I just want to be clear that, of course, I know quantum physics is hard. I have a PhD in this topic. I know it's difficult to explain. I'm not saying that it's trivial. I'm not saying that they're not open questions and it's not like a super counterintuitive thing. But here I'm going to point out in the next slide some of the things that I hear from people whenever I'm trying to bring attention to the issue of hype. When I say physicists' opinions, it's opinions that I heard in regards to what I have to say. So, for instance, it's not worth fighting because physics is too difficult, which for me is very typically a hubris thing. The person just like, oh, okay, I'm a physicist. I study quantum physics, and I always think that this was hard. So my whole personality is to be a physicist, and I like being smarter. And it sounds dumb, but you can feel like that's the vibe from people, from physicists. So it's very convenient to keep this idea that quantum physics is super hard. There are many instances where people are like, oh, we cannot discuss this without equations, even though many of the equations, many of the formulations that we think about quantum physics or modern physics came after the concepts. So it's kind of weird. It's a very convenient point of view for in my opinion. And here's just a pet peeve of mine, because physicists seem to love naming things in a silly way, because it's fun for them, for sure it's fun. But then you name things like spook action at a distance, magic state distillation, magic numbers, quantum teleportation. and you refuse to elaborate because you're not going to actually do like a science communication piece, or when someone actually does a science communication piece on this, you get pissed off because they are misunderstanding this. Well, you're not helping at all, right? Which is okay. I think we should be like gimmicky, of course. Like part of the nice thing about physics is having a bit of fun. But then you should at least try to make an effort to make it clear that, okay, this actually, this means this and that, and doesn't mean that other thing. And have a bit of responsibility of in regards to the things that you're saying, right? Another topic, and that's a big one for me, is that many people argue that we have plenty of content accessible in a way in the internet, in English. And this is, of course, coming from my context in Brazil, which speak Portuguese. The truth is that 5% of the Brazilian population speak English. So if you expect that English content per se is going to be enough, I mean, you're absolutely neglecting a very big chunk of the population, and you consider this to be okay. So I think this is at least debatable. Not saying that there are not efforts to translate things, but these efforts are generally very volunteer-based, which we know that is a whole difficulty, as saying as someone that actually tried to translate stuff as well. And also it comes back to the conformity, right? Because if people don't think it's important, and we have this culture in Brazil and other places that if you're at least in grad school, you need to know English, which is not really like, I myself, I knew English, but that's not true for everyone. Some people are still trying to catch up and try to learn. In undergrad, is also a bit like desirable for you to learn English, and we learn things in English, and we read articles in English, so people just assume that everyone knows, but we're in a super academic niche, and not giving a least bit of thought outside that. And this, I should note here, I'm more talking about the quantum physics conflated with mysticism type thing, but you also have, of course, quantum computation. I'm gonna link them together later on. But in particularly, this idea of quantum hype's not hurting anyone, for the quantum physics, quantum mysticism, quantum healing, for me, is very glaring. This is a photo of me on my neighborhood in Brazil. And I assume, unless someone speaks Portuguese, but they're saying there's some therapies. And some of the therapies are biomagnetism, quantum table, quantum healing. Of course, yeah, a bunch of things like Feng Shui, which I believe more than quantum healing for sure. So you see how those things are conflated, and people are actually making money out of it by the obscurity. They are using the obscurity, they are using the fact that we're not talking about this at all to sell stuff, right? I think it's shady, at least, that you're saying that it's not hurting anyone. And then this is a go-to as well for people that actually acknowledge that there is a problem with hype. They suggest that, okay, so let's only let the physicists talk about quantum physics, which sounds reasonable at first. I think it's an okay point of view. It's appeal to authority, which can be okay, but also cannot be very okay, because when you try to bring this to quantum technologies and you just say, oh, physicists are the only one that should talk about it, but there's a lot of people in computing, a lot of people in math trying to talk about it. And also, they think that if it's outside the context of physics, like quantum computer, it's already bullshit. Because it goes like the complete opposite. People are trying to solve the hype by saying that everything that's not quantum physics, and people take this literally, is hype. And I'm saying this as someone that does science communication content on Instagram and try to talk about this. And there are a couple times that I was talking about quantum computing and people are like, oh, you're a charlatan because you're talking about quantum computer. I was like, no, please, I'm a physicist, you know? And also, if you don't look like a physicist, of course, there's another layer of difficulty because if you're doing the appeal authority, one of the issues the appeal authority is that you're basing the things in semiotics. You're hoping that the person is going to trust someone. And I can guarantee that if you're a Brazilian and a woman, people are not going to trust you very well in what you're talking about quantum computing. So it's a weird situation. It's a situation that like we try to remedy in without having any formal incentives, any formal, for instance, a center for science communication. This is hard. And this is something that I think there's one of the difference between Global North and Global South, because when I came to Canada, I was nearby Institute for Quantum Computing, and they do have like a science outreach sector. When I went to the Netherlands for an event, they have like quantum ethics initiatives. They have a bunch of things. So I guess from the point of view, especially the Global North, was that, oh, okay, this is being tackled. It's not being tackled. Not everywhere. And this is creating even more of a divide. If you do pour money, which I think is good, that's okay. But I need to bring to attention that there's a bit of a responsibility in terms of what is created in English, because those things get translated. And here I mentioned aliens with quantum computers. Maybe some people will get the reference, maybe not. But one famous science communicator very recently, he went to a podcast, he was trying to talk about his book, and he mentioned that he believes in aliens, and if aliens exist, they should have quantum computers. That's the kind of thing that he was going for. So, which I think is very, very shady. And of course, was very nice for like draw the views from that podcast and everything. But there's this issue, and maybe you notice that people will confuse speculation, futurism, and not being clear that from that point on, they are speculating. But the thing is, this kind of science communicator are the ones that are going to get translated to Portuguese and end up on our libraries, you know? And so if there's not a quality control and there's not immediate reaction, this will get worse after being translated. So there's a bit of an ethics thing, I believe. And here's some more, well, as I say, it makes it worse, but that's... Here's, I'm gonna show some stuff from Google Trends and from the Google search query. If you search for, is quantum ... In English, is quantum physics real, proven, deterministic, related to space, whatever. Those are the kind of things that show up. In Portuguese, the same query, but translated to Portuguese. They're talking about love of attraction, spirituality, spiritism, faith, Bible. So this is kind of how it goes in Brazil. And this is another level of difficulty when you're talking about trying to occupy spaces in social media, because we're using the same hashtags. We're using quantum physics hashtags and competing with people that are saying that it's law of attraction, that is related to God. I'm going to show some examples later. But this figure, other figures, I just want to make it clear that there is a very clear difference of what is meant by quantum hype and what's the situation for each country. Here's, for instance, Instagram, and TikTok. If you search for quantum physics, this is in Spanish, but it shows up when you search using Portuguese. Funny enough, this didn't happen in Brazil, but now that I'm searching in Canada, apparently they conflate Spanish and Portuguese results, which is terrible for me because sometimes I want to just look at Portuguese. But okay, here's saying about Dirac equation. This Dirac equation is not for sure what they're claiming here, which is the equation of love. The equation of love that tells how people are always connected. Because they, even if they get separated by light years. So you see, they are using some terms that are scientific. They're using an equation that exists, and they're claiming something that doesn't make any sense, you know? Okay, that's TikTok. This is Instagram for quantum physics. So for this one, I think, except the first one, all the others are mysticism. This one's about aliens. The ones about religion. Some of them are about law of attraction again. So it's tricky. It's tricky to talk about quantum physics. In that environment, that should be better. It's getting better. It's getting better, in particular for Brazil. But I would like to show that this is a pattern. Here, for instance, this is Google Trends. If you go to Google Trends, you can search for the queries in a given time period. If you look at the option topic, then it's going to have translated and similar terms together, right? So if you look for the United States, the past 5 years, and you compare the interest between quantum healing and quantum computing, there's a clear divide here. Quantum computing in red, much more interest than quantum healing. Of course, this is just one term we could change, but it's a pretty solid pattern that one term is much more searched than the other. That's the pattern from Brazil. So as you can see, we're really competing for attention here. And you can see that it's starting to get like a bit of a gap between them. And this figure is not updated. There's actually a bigger gap, and Brazil actually finally is starting to get more similar to United States. That's because we get some investment for quantum technologies center over there. There was some funding, and they managed to do some marketing about it. So things are starting getting better. But the thing is, this type of pattern and the other pattern, similar to the United States, you can see in different countries happening. This is something that I'm starting to study now, so just for better comparison. Canada, I think, similar to this, but there are many countries, Latin America, some countries, I think, Asia, and some countries in Europe, even there's a pattern like this. Interestingly, in Africa, you don't see that much interest in quantum healing. But there's pretty much those two graphs. And there are other, also, there are some countries that you don't really have that much data, which is yet another methodological problem. But then again, just here trying to show there are very clear qualitative differences and what we should discuss, what it means to have hype around the topic. And I want to, maybe I'm focusing too much on quantum physics, but I just want to make clear that this is they use very similar arguments when you're saying, oh, quantum computing is too complicated instead of quantum physics or quantum mechanics too complicated. So for me, I'm hearing the same story again. And when they say, oh, we should deal with quantum hype like this, like that, first of all, I can see very clear blind spots, what they consider, oh, we already have a center for like science outreach. For me, this is a very clear blind spot. We don't have this everywhere. We have very different concepts, what is hype, as I mentioned, and we should consider this if we want to tackle this in a responsible way. So here, discussing a bit these knowledge barriers and how it goes to become export barriers. So those are some of the things discussed in a document called Quantum Computing Governance Principles from World Economic Forum. And I think they have a very interesting and reasonable view on these things, so I like to point that out. They're mentioning in terms of awareness, what are the risks? In this document, they mention a lot about risks of everything. So, but I think they're pretty well spot on here. Misinformation about quantum computing can create unwarranted fears. I think this is pretty clear. If you have hype, you can exaggerate some fears. You can see this happening in other technologies. I would say, in my personal opinion, there are many fears that are not they're actually being downplayed, but I'm gonna get there. But this is, I think this is a legitimate point. They also mentioned that even from economic perspective, because many are saying about ethics and what is right to do and how this impacts the global south, if maybe you guys don't care about, I don't know. But from economic perspective, this can create problems because the thing is that if you create and you get all investment based on hype and selling promises that are inflated, this can come bite you later on because the expectations will lead to a perception of under-delivery, which could restrict funding. And I think we can see this a bit already. Not saying that there is a quantum winter, but as I said, I've been doing science communication for 4 or 5 years now. And I'm always try to gauge a bit how's the perception of people, especially on Twitter. And for quantum computers, for some years now, it's being like not that talked about, in particular in Portuguese, but in general, not super a hot topic in comparison to other topics, especially because AI becomes such a big thing. But from, I don't know, 1 year ago for now, people are starting to get like really conspirationist. Like, I don't believe in quantum computers, which I think is fair because if you are looking from far away and you see, oh, there's the Google thing, they did something very nice, and then someone say, oh, it's not like that, and then you're looking at from the outside, not really understanding the nuance, and just looking at the headlines or whatever shows up to you, maybe you're gonna see, okay, it doesn't go like this. I mean, for someone that's trying to be informed about it, they're gonna look at this, they're gonna look at whatever source they have, and get an opinion on this. Which is funny because it's yet another way to make things difficult for science communication, right? And I talk about conspiracy, I do see like, this is kind of sad because quantum physics, together with quantum mysticism, people can go wild with that. But now I'm starting to see people putting quantum computing in their conspiracy theories. Like I saw someone that posted about how 2020 was a simulation made by a quantum computer. People are now using the word decoherence, which is actually a physics jargon in their like nonsense. So for me, and then that's why I want to bring this home and how those things are connected, this is not new for me. This is just like a continuation of what they are doing already without no one caring about quantum physics with quantum mysticism. It's just that quantum computers start to get on the same boat. And here, of course, the connection to it all. We can have overreaction of policymakers, possibly resulting in the nationalization of quantum computers, quantum computing development, which is something that we for sure are starting to see. So, as you can see here, we have some headlines about it. This is not that new. I think it's from 1 year ago at least. which is the ban from the United States in regards to China, to microelectronics, semiconductors, quantum technologies, and AI. There's a very clear ban in regards to China. And then there's this piece from New Scientist. They are posting quite a lot about it, actually. Multiple nations enact mysterious export controls on quantum computers. This one's more objective. They are talking about, for instance, how they are banning quantum computers with 34 or more qubits, which in the quantum community was very laughable because there's a tiny, very tiny quantum computer, especially now. And here's another New Science article that they're mentioning about this and saying that there is no basis science. So as you can see, like you start to see this kind of movimentation to nationalize and create export control, which, as this person argues, it relates a bit to not fully understanding. I think there's some merit to this, but also I think there's a bit of a once again hubris from scientists because they think they know the whole story, and we don't always know the whole story. There's a bunch of confidentiality agreements. We don't quite know exactly how the technology is, and it seems like people don't really acknowledge this. Even though you're a quantum scientist and you know well the theory or the experiments or the codes or whatever, you don't necessarily know the whole state of art because it's not accessible to you. You don't know about everything. So maybe these 34 qubits, this export control is there, so people don't scale up. I think there's another fair way to think. And this thing for me is very divisive because I agree that some of the, and this is something to pay a lot of attention about, policymakers will do things that doesn't really make sense to us, but at the same time, we shouldn't think that we know everything just because we're like the masters of the theory. And this is why we should debate this kind of thing and not just laugh about, you know? And here I just want to point out one quote that I like a lot because Rutherford is a physicist that was very involved in nuclear physics. And he is one of the people, not the only one, there's a bunch of people that were in the beginning of nuclear physics that really don't believe that we could have any nuclear reaction with like energy production from atomic reactions. And this was like the same decade that we actually had our first sustained reaction, then Manhattan Project and all and all. So sometimes we attain ourselves to the today and what we know. So a bit about the economic situation. I think maybe you guys are familiar with this graph. But as you can see, there's, I don't know if you can see very well, but there are countries in which the investment is in the orders of billions. United States, European Union, China is 15 billion, which is a lot. And many others that are in the orders of millions, tens of millions. There's quite a divide, and as you can see, there's a bunch of countries in gray, so they are not even being included here. A bunch from South America. Brazil is showing up. That's the first year that they show up. That was 2023 because of an investment that we have. But as you can see, this very incomplete graph, it looks very colorful. It looks like a lot of information, but if you really notice, there's not that many countries involved in this. And according to this link here about the quantum divide, which I think is very interesting, only 15 countries have a national quantum strategy. And we have like almost 200 countries, right? This, of course, can be taken with a grain of salt. There are some other things that we should look up, like how many countries are looking for cloud access, for instance. But I think the national quantum strategy is important, especially thinking about post-quantum quantum readiness, right? Security. And also, if you only have cloud access and they decide to remove this, what do you do, right? Some countries just give up and they are not investing in hardware because it's difficult, because they don't have the people, because they don't have the equipment, or because they already are being sanctioned. Some countries decide that quantum computer is too big of a risk, and they are going to try to do something with a more like quantum sensing, which is a bit of a more mature, more safe bet. So, and about the cloud thing, there are situations where we are already having restriction for some countries for their cloud access for quantum computers, right? So it's not something for the future, even though we don't quite have quantum computers. Once again, this is already happening. And if you look at the list, you don't always, there's some countries that say, okay, this might be like a geopolitical thing, and others that are like, okay, right? So, and you imagine that the tendency is that the more the quantum computers get better, the more restrictive those things are. So the sovereignty is an important thing for those countries in terms of security, but many of them already give up. So about harvest now, decrypt later, the whole breaking RSA, which we already talked a bit before in the first, before lunch, right? What I see a lot of the argument is that there's plenty of time. Once again, people are thinking exactly at the moment and what they know. There's plenty of time. The quantum computers are too noisy. They're not scaling, and on and on. Or we can just migrate to quantum resistance cryptography, which, as Constantine commented, that's not going to be instantaneous, and this is not going to be free, right? This is a problem that seems to go over people's head. And then, if you add the fact that some countries are not there, are not looking at a national quantum strategy, that makes it even harder, right? So some of the things that I like to bring attention and I keep in my mind is which countries will be able to migrate in time, right? Even if you have like a very conservative estimation, there are countries that are not having this conversation. There are countries that I had conversations, friends of mine that tried to reach out to people, higher ups in a country in the global south, that is very hard to talk to them because they are not quite sure what quantum computer means. So why would you invest in this, right? Or what quantum resistant means. That's even worse because you need to understand quantum computer and cryptography, right? How to convince countries that don't engage with quantum technologies to care about it. And you don't need to say, oh, build a quantum computer. That seems to be the route. I don't know why. Actually, I think it's very concerning that this is the route because it seems like whenever you pose this second question, it's always, how do you make, and I actually saw someone posing like this, how do we make other countries try to build a quantum computer? And I don't think that's the way to go. I think countries need to be prepared for being quantum resistant or do whatever they want because every country has their own priorities. Some of them doesn't make any sense to invest in a quantum computer, right? But the idea that everyone should have a quantum computer sounds weird to me because it's very Cold War. It's very, because having a quantum computer will not help you be protected from quantum computer, right? The only thing that a quantum computer will help is to be a menace, to be a menace like the other countries. So the idea is that everyone's a menace. And if so, like, what are we doing, right? And it seems like people are really not discussing this. People are always like, oh, quantum computers, applications, nice, drug discovery, okay, fine. But this is shady. This is objectively an issue for me. And here the small note, especially considering that this investment will not have immediate financial return, and this, you can imagine, is a deal breaker for many countries. You can explain, okay, you're more safe, you're gonna not lose money, you're gonna not, in the long run, But it's hard to argue to invest in something that is not going to give an immediate return and that looks like a mysterious technology, right? And how to convince well-prepared countries that this is everyone's problem. And I say this because every country will have their allies. So if you have allies that are economically allies, they're not prepared for this, what happens to you as well, right? And of course, I wish that was not the argument. I wish we were just thinking in a more ethical way how to like not create a Cold War type situation, right? But as I mentioned, the actions and the negligence about quantum and about communicating quantum in the global north to the people that have more money will trickle down to other countries. So I wish people have more of a global idea, a global notion in terms of that. So yeah, just want to wrap it up because I think it was maybe a wild ride. I talk about a bunch of things, and I mostly wanted to talk about quantum hype, but I hope I managed to connect some dots here to explain how some of the negligence, some of not talking about quantum physics, quantum computing will lead to a completely alienation of some other countries or some players. And most of all, I wish that we could see this as a pursuit of knowledge, a pursuit of making knowledge open. I think quantum computer is very interesting. This is why I'm working with it. I think it's very neat. And I just wanted us to have a more responsible approach to this and not just go fast and break things. And I'd like to end to one more note with from the Guerrilla Open Access, which Aaron Swartz is commenting that if you have access to the resources, you have been given a privilege, and you need not, and you morally cannot, keep this privilege to yourself. So this is pretty much my point of view. Now that I'm in Canada, I think I can. I have more opportunities. I probably wouldn't be at DEFCON if I was in Brazil because the prices will be hard to pay my flight here. And I'm having more opportunities. I'm trying to give it back to Brazil. I'm trying to keep producing content in Portuguese. I'm thinking more and more globally after I managed to go to some events and discuss this more to people. And hopefully this is inspired a message to think more globally as well for you guys. Thanks, everyone. Here's like my handle and my email as well.
All right, that was a brilliant talk. Thank you very much, Bruna. Okay, are there any questions? Come forth. The question mic beckons you. A little quiet.
Good thing I'm loud. Thank you, Bruna. It's a really interesting talk. I wanted to ask you, you talked a lot about this quantum healing stuff that goes on. It goes on in the US too, but I hear you're highlighting that it's particularly an issue in Brazil where you're from. What are some, what would you say is the most effective way we can limit this? Because if someone's going to a quantum healer instead of a doctor, that's a healthcare catastrophe. So considering how significant this issue is, what would you say are solutions that can be implemented to address this for Brazil and for everyone?
Great question. I think I would like to have more solutions actually, but yeah, one thing that I saw happening for another pseudoscience that I don't quite know the name in English, but people start like really coming after saying, well, this really should not be offered and it was being offered in our health system back in Brazil as like a legitimate treatment, and this is what imposed people to actually go after and say, no, this is not correct. So I think taking this seriously is a very big first step, and from my experience, we're a bit far away from this. Just by the questions that I showed that people generally have, people think that we shouldn't talk about quantum. People think that it's not an issue. So I think if we manage to raise a bit awareness and show, yeah, there are consequences of quantum healing or not talking about quantum security, post-quantum, this is a big start. And of course, if we could have investment and try to democratize this knowledge to be actually available to different countries, different level of previous knowledge, that would be fantastic.
So my question is not regarding quantum healing. Sorry, closer. It's about, so post-quantum cryptography, we hear different opinions on when we're going to have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer able to break the RSA algorithm. Some people say 10 years. I heard in Black Hat one of the researchers saying like he's not going to see while he's alive. So what's your take on this?
I think he might be right, but life goes on after he's alive, you know. I think the issue, and I think the harvest now, the crypt later, encapsulate this very well. If someone harvests the data, and this data turns out to be still relevant by the time they manage to decrypt, that's a problem, right? And if you're evaluating case by case, people, what seems to be the directives for people trying to go for a post-quantum, try to migrate to post-quantum, they always say, oh, you should look, what exactly do you have that is sensitive information? What's the shelf life of this sensitive information? You don't need to migrate everything necessarily by now. You don't need to migrate all of it. So I think there's nuance to this. But I try not to think of timeline for post-quantum because I think we have a problem now. We have a problem like yesterday because there's probably data that's already harvested, you know. And we should not just wait and see which physicist or which cryptographer was correct, you know.
Excellent question. Any other questions? Jonathan.
Thanks for the talk. In many places, crystals are marketed for their healing powers. I've yet to meet a material scientist who cares. Why should quantum scientists care about the mystics that adopt the term quantum?
I'm actually from material science, so I do care. I guess, yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to convince people to care. Because if it doesn't happen to someone close to you, or if you don't see this happen, once I gave a talk about this in Brazil, and most people ask me similar questions. Why should we care as a physicist or something like this? And for me, it's a moral duty. But also, at the end of the talk, someone said, oh, I have a relative that went for these treatments and it was an issue. And I'm like, I know, there's people that's like, Bruna, please talk to my mother because she's going for quantum healing treatments, you know. So it is an issue. It's just because we don't always see in front of us. And that's why I'm really bringing data from countries that you maybe don't care about. It's there and it trickles down.
All right, can you please give it up once more for Bruna? Thank you.